Close your eyes for just a second. Imagine this scene straight from the biblical texts. You're standing right before the great white throne. There's this total, awe-inspiring silence. Millions of souls are waiting, and suddenly, Jesus, acting as the supreme judge, looks straight into your eyes. Talk about a powerful image, right? Today, we are diving into a really fascinating biblical explainer that breaks down exactly what the source text says happens in this ultimate moment of accountability.
Okay, let's dive into this. The source material roots its entire premise in one single, incredibly sobering verse. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27. The analysis points out that, it really doesn't matter if you're a big-shot entrepreneur, a stay-at-home parent, 20 years old, or 80. It doesn't matter if you were born in France, the US, or China. Appearing before this judgment seat is presented by the text not as some vague metaphor, but as an approaching literal reality for absolutely everyone.
But here's where the analysis takes a really fascinating turn. Most people picture Judgment Day as this cosmic ledger, right? A terrifying moment where a massive book gets flipped open and a laundry list of every single past mistake is just read aloud. Well, the source text actually argues against that whole idea. Instead, it suggests Jesus will ask very specific questions. These aren't just, factual inquiries. They're designed to completely bypass what you did and reveal who you truly are on the inside.
According to this deep dive into the scriptures, there aren't 100 questions. There aren't even 10. There are exactly 3 hidden questions in the biblical texts, and we're going to reveal them in this explainer to help you prepare for that day. The source suggests that wrapping your head around these 3 specific questions right now can completely shift how you live today. So, what's the first one?
Here's the first major pillar of judgment. What will you do with my son? Now, you might be scratching your head thinking, wait a minute, isn't Jesus the Son? How could he be asking a question about himself? Well, the text explains this through the theological concept of the Trinity. Jesus, sitting as the supreme judge, represents all of divinity in that exact moment. He's asking what you've done with the sacrifice that was offered to you. It's all about your direct, personal response to his grace.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how the text categorizes the 3 potential answers people are going to give. The first group points to good works. They'll say, hey, I was honest. I helped the poor. But the analysis notes that works alone can't pay the price for sin. The second group, they point to religious routines. Going to church, singing in the choir, but they just had a religion, not a true relationship. It's only the third response, recognizing your own flaws and humbly accepting grace, that the text says actually opens the door to eternal joy.
The source leans heavily on 1 John 5:12 to really drive this home. Look at the language used here. To have or not to have. There is zero middle ground presented in this biblical framework. No more or less, no, yeah, I think so. It strictly emphasizes having a personal relationship and allowing his sacrifice to completely wash away your past, no matter how far off track you might have strayed.
Once that relational foundation is solidly established, we arrive at the second question. How have you treated my little ones? Notice how the focus dramatically shifts here. We're moving from internal, personal faith directly into how that faith physically manifests out in the world, specifically toward the marginalized people in society.
The source is incredibly specific about who these little ones actually are. And spoiler alert, it's not just children. It outlines orphans who grew up without unconditional love, widows facing deep, quiet loneliness, and immigrants arriving in a totally new city only to face prejudice. It even includes prisoners, and not just those locked behind physical iron bars, but folks trapped by depression or severe addiction. It mentions the sick, the abandoned, and those who are emotionally starving for just a single moment of tenderness. So the question is, did you offer them love, or did you offer them prejudice?
And this brilliantly illustrates the core theology of Matthew 25. The text frames human interaction in just a breathtaking way. Basically, every time you helped someone in need, you were physically serving Jesus himself. On the flip side, every single time you ignored someone in need, you were actively rejecting Christ. The judge and the beggar are presented as literally one and the same.
But there is a super vital caveat here. The analysis points out that Jesus isn't asking how many massive charity campaigns you organized, or how many giant checks you wrote just to get a round of applause from society. Not at all. In this kingdom framework, the greatness of the love behind the action vastly outweighs the actual size of the action itself. A simple glass of water, a quick hospital visit, or just a really genuine hug, those carry eternal weight if they're done with true, selfless love.
Which brings us to the third and final question of the judgment. Where are the fruits you should have borne?
The biblical analysis uses a really powerful agricultural metaphor here, drawing straight from John chapter 15. Believers are likened to trees planted on earth, watered and nourished by Jesus, who acts as the ultimate vine dresser. And naturally, what does a vine dresser expect? A harvest, of course.
Let's move to and see how this builds across different aspects of life. The text categorizes 5 specific expected fruits. First up, the fruits of the Spirit. That means displaying real inner peace and joy. Then, evangelism, which is sharing the truth with others. Discipleship, meaning actually training and guiding people. Holiness, pursuing a life separated from just blending in with the world. And finally, faithfulness, which simply asks, did you faithfully use the specific talents, gifts, and resources you were personally entrusted with?
To really highlight the danger of failing this third question, the source recalls that famous anecdote of the barren fig tree from the book of Mark. Jesus saw this tree from afar, right? It was full of leaves, looking incredibly healthy, and honestly quite seductive. But when he got up close, it was completely empty of fruit. So he cursed it. This is presented as a stark warning against having the leaves of religious appearance. Think evangelical language and deep biblical knowledge, but without the actual fruit of a genuinely transformed character.
And that leads directly to one of the absolute most shocking warnings in the entire biblical text, found in Matthew 7. People are going to stand before the judge and point to their massive ministries, their prophecies, maybe even miracles done in his name. Yet the response will be, I never knew you. The analysis argues that if powerful deeds and public impressiveness don't stem from a truly transformed inner character, they mean absolutely nothing in the end.
So the text invites us into a moment of really deep self-reflection. I want you to imagine Jesus inspecting your life today, right now, exactly like a vine dresser inspects a tree. What would he actually find? Would he uncover sincere love or just a polite, superficial tolerance? Would he find genuine joy or just some forced smiles? Would he see a profound inner peace or just an anxious, heavily disguised religiosity?
Fortunately, the explainer's source material doesn't just leave us sitting in despair. It offers what it describes as an incredibly powerful message of hope. Basically, as long as you're still breathing, the season of fruit is not over. You don't have to somehow bear all this fruit on your own strength. The text emphasizes that by stopping the pretense and connecting deeply with the true vine, the Holy Spirit can work through you. It's about transforming even the driest, most barren branches into something truly beautiful and fruitful.
So, the crucial point is this. We've looked at the question of the son, the question of the little ones, and the question of the fruit. The source leaves us with one incredibly provocative thought to chew on. If you were standing in that reverent silence right now, and those eyes looked directly into yours, what would your answer be? The text urges us not to wait for a deathbed to figure it out, but to make that definitive choice today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.